So tonight I'm going to ask you to begin to find a way back to your heart, to the goodness, the compassion, the generosity, and the joy that's inside. If you can get beyond ego, it is there. So the first step, because we're always very practical here, and we give you practical ways to work with this. The first step is meditation. The practice of meditation allows you to see the thoughts. And when you begin to see the thoughts, you begin to see the first layer of ego, the first outer layer of ego. And it's helpful. And you can work with that. So practice. Meditate. 10 minutes a day. It doesn't take a huge amount of time. And I know that we all have 10 minutes a day. The second thing that I would recommend is begin to notice how you cover your heart and block your experience of the world. The way that I did when I noticed that I read the article and I noticed how I felt. Notice how you feel when you see the homeless person on the street. Don't turn. Notice how you feel first. How do you feel? Do you feel anything? I would guess that most of us first feel numb. Numb. We feel numb in our lives. We are numb. That is a tragedy. I think that is a tragedy. But notice it. Begin to notice how you feel. Get in your body and begin to notice how you relate to the world. Begin to notice. Once you begin to notice, that is the first thing. When you see where you're at, then you begin to know what you can do next. But the thing that I'm going to ask, and this is going to take a lot of fearlessness and a lot of almost faith, really. But you have to begin to practice allowing the world to touch you. And that may mean pain. It probably will mean pain. It's going to hurt. I mean, we live in a world with a lot of suffering in it. There's a lot of joy too. There's a lot of joy. And you will see that not only does the ego block the suffering, it also blocks the joy of your life. It numbs you. It numbs you not just in the negative, but also from all the beauty. So it's something, you know, you have to begin to practice letting the world touch you to experience what your heart can feel again. You want to let your heart begin to feel again. So how do you do this? Well, I say there's something, you all know how to meditate. The first thing about meditation is, you know, you let your thoughts go. So notice them and let them go. So let's say you are experiencing a homeless person on the street and you're not turning your head away. You are going to be present with that person on the street and you're going to allow it to touch you. You're going to have to drop the storyline. There may be a storyline that you tell yourself when you see homeless people. I don't know what it is. Maybe they should have a job. Maybe they do drugs. I don't know what it is, but you want to drop the storyline. Whatever story it is, you tell yourself. There's also something that we do when we see suffering, which is we do a lot of reasoning with ourselves. We tell ourselves a lot of reason and rhetoric. A lot of sometimes we have political rhetoric that arises when we see suffering in the world. And you're going to have to drop that. You have to let these things go. Judgment. You're going to have to drop the judgment too. You might notice that you feel judgmental. You might be judgmental of the situation. You might be judgmental of yourself. If you want to access your heart, you have to drop the judgment also. You really have to just be present with the situation as it is, with gentleness. I know that for me, when I experience pain, the thing that arises very quickly is anger. That is it's a secondary emotion to pain. And so for me, I have to work with that. I notice I'm angry, I'm not angry. I'm hurt, I'm not angry. And so I have to let the anger go to access what's real. What's real is the pain. this process of beginning to allow the world to touch you, your heart, is something that's you're going to have to work with your mind to drop the stories, drop the reasoning, the rhetoric, the anger, and get to what's really there, what's just there in that moment when you're present with the suffering. And it's pain, probably. But I'm telling you that it's worthwhile, because when you begin to connect with your heart again and get touched, it begins to, it changes you. It changes you. You have to begin to let the world in and experience it as it is. You know, many of us think that in order to live in this world with all this suffering, in order to cope and live in this world, that we have to turn away. We can't bear to see this. We can't bear it. What? You know, this is too much. How can I bear that? And I'm going to challenge you to test that, because I think that the human heart is vast and all-accommodating. And if we just begin to liberate it from the suffocation and the fear of the ego, we can begin to connect with all that is good that is locked up inside of it. So you all have heard of the first noble truth, which is suffering. And Obama talked about this too in the speech. We all have pleasure and pain in our life. There is no escaping the suffering in our lives. There is not a single being on this planet that will come into existence and leave existence without having suffered. And we pretend that we can protect ourselves from it. And it's a lie. It's an illusion. And all that we end up doing is numbing ourselves from the beauty that the suffering can bring to our lives. This experience, when people are touched, even through suffering, it brings out the best in them. The goodness, the compassion and the connection and the kindness, the love, the generosity, the best in humanity is inspired in the worst tragedies. And it doesn't have to be just inspired in the worst tragedies. We can access that always. It's just that in the midst of these huge tragedies, the ego cracks. It cannot be bound. The heart cannot be bound up by ego in these worst of tragedies, and the heart arises without. But we can work with our ego and soften our hearts, connect with the world more directly every day, and be touched by our world every day, and be touched by the people in our lives every day. How many times has somebody said to you, "I love you," and you felt nothing? You just said back, "I love you too. I love you too." How about you feel it and let them love you? How about you feel it? The next time somebody says, "I love you," take that second and let it in. Let it touch you. Let that in. I have a quote from this lovely, amazing book by Chögyam Trungpa. Well, here, I recommend this to anybody who's interested in this stuff. On the other hand, if we are in touch with basic goodness, we are always relating to the world directly, choicelessly, whether the energy of the situation demands a destructive or a constructive response. And then he goes on to say, warriorship is so tender, without skin, without tissue, naked and raw. It is soft and gentle. You have renounced putting on a new suit of armor. You have renounced growing a thick, hard skin. You are willing to expose naked flesh, bone, and marrow to the world. That is, I think that's the experience of warriorship. In this tradition, we talk about being warriors of the spiritual warriorship. And warriorship is being fearlessness, having enough fearlessness to directly connect with the world as it is, without this armor of ego blocking our experience of it. We have to begin to allow our world to touch us. We have to wake up to the nightmare of our times and allow ourselves to be really touched by it so that it can inspire us to be of benefit. When you allow your heart to be touched, this goodness and compassion and love and generosity arises, and from that, this authentic presence arises. And from the authentic presence, right action arises. That doesn't require any thinking. You just know what's right. When you connect directly with your heart, you allow these things to touch you. There's an authenticness that arises, and then you act from that, and that is the right action. It comes naturally. It springs out of that. There's not any shoulds. You should have done that. I shouldn't. There's no should. You just act from that place, and it's clear. You know, it's clear after what we've seen in these last weeks, is that the world that we live in desperately needs our hearts. And so I'm asking that you let this tragedy touch you. When you see the suffering on the street, don't turn your head. Stay present and let their suffering touch you. And open your heart and be touched by your world. Connect with your world directly. And I guarantee the more you open your heart to the world, to the pain of others, the pain of yourself, and your own suffering, the more alive you will be. The more loving you will be. The more connected you will be, the more compassionate you will be, and the more benefit you will be in this world. I'm going to close with a poem, and then we can open it up to some discussion. Wild Geese. This is a poem by Mary Oliver. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things.